He's a former law enforcement officer. Left police department, joined the sheriff's office, became a detective, and specialized by accident in investigating sex assaults on children. He's here to talk about very difficult cases and what often the media gets wrong. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. There's a couple ways you can stay in touch and keep informed of what's going on with the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Number one, go to our website, letradio.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. It's real easy to find. I promise we don't spam you. I send out about one email every 2 weeks or so. And there's also a feature called broadcast channels on our Facebook page where we send messages directly to your inbox, directly to your messenger. Real easy to sign up for. Make sure you like or follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And up top, you'll see broadcast channels, one for free podcast versions of the radio show, another one top post of the day. So you too can stay informed quickly, easily, and best of all, like always, free. Joining us on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is Bryan McCree. Bryan is a retired sheriff's detective in Georgia. He's joining us from Georgia. And now his website is lems.online. That's lems.online. I promise you we'll talk later about what he's doing today. Bryan, A, thanks for your service. B, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. It's very much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to talk about a couple things that, I'll be honest with you, there's so much about American police work that people get wrong. For example, if I go to Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page and I post something about a complex investigation or an officer getting hurt, it's crickets. It's not a whole lot of response. Yet, I post something about someone getting pulled over for speeding, going for 120 miles an hour in a 55 or 65 zone. The boo birds come out. People have no real conception of what goes on. And I think part of the problem is we've entrusted the media, the mainstream legacy media, for too long to tell our stories. And now they just don't. They're so biased it's not even close to the truth.
Coupled with that, and then you got to consider the fact that law enforcement doesn't have really any positive interactions with the community.
No.
Think about it. To your point, we're either in the rearview mirror about to pull them over and write them a ticket. They've been a victim of a crime, and we're there because they need us, or we're there taking somebody that they care about to jail.
I always said this, Bryan, no one ever appreciated seeing me when I was a police officer in Baltimore unless it was my lunch break. There were very few times I took lunch.
That's
Then
right.
they want to come talk to you.
That's right. Hey, I know you're eating, but I have a question about concealed carry. And it's like, let me swallow my food and try not to be that guy.
I don't want to be that guy, but some people, let's be honest, they make it difficult.
And they do. They do. It's a lack of boundaries. I need you when I need you, but when I don't want you or I'm on my way to work, leave me be.
And it's very rare in Baltimore that we had opportunity, like on Sundays when we worked day work. Sundays, it was quiet. I was a sergeant, and I decided I'm going to go to church. I'm going to take my own lunch break, which is very rare for me to do because we just didn't have time. And I'm going to go to church for 20, 30 minutes. And you should have seen the evil eyes I got from being in police uniform in church from people like, well, shame on you. What is wrong with you? I'm like, you don't even know what we do.
That's right. I've had people stop me and tell me that I couldn't bring my gun into church.
Yeah.
We want you to take all your gear off, and you're welcome to visit, welcome to commune with us, but we don't want you to have any of this in here.
Well, I'm glad to hear it's not just a Maryland thing; it's a Georgia thing too.
No, it's a Georgia thing. It's a different perception, and sometimes you just got to roll with it. Sometimes you just got to go, okay, well, I can worship in my car by myself.
That's right. That's what we want to do. So I want to go a little bit to your career. When did you start, and when did you retire?
Wow. Gosh, I started in 1999. I went to the night police academy. In Georgia, you could not work a single day till you went to the police academy, and they offered a nighttime academy for those who wanted to be reserve officers. And I went for 6 months. every Tuesday and Thursday night and every Saturday for 6 months. My class had 8 people in it.
That's to be a reserve. That's to be a reserve officer.
Correct. We couldn't carry a gun, couldn't have a badge, could not be certified, could not work unless you were certified. So this was the last time the ABAC Police Academy did a nighttime session, and there were 8 of us. And we all went to this thing to be reserve deputies. Within 6 months, all of us had quit our $80,000, $90,000 jobs and were cops. And we all made a really good career out of it.
Isn't it funny how, and I see, we didn't have reserve officers in my day in Baltimore. And by the way, you're what we call a rookie. I started in 1980 Academy. So I was hurt and retired at 92. But
wow.
We did 6 months the academy. We talk about the yearly in-service training, the daily roll call training, and they're like, man, you need more training. What? Are you kidding me? Well, we'll sit through one more stupid, boring class. But a lot of that comes from, and we didn't have reserve officers, what I was getting at. Reserve, in certain areas, that means you do it for free. Other ones, you're part-time. Right. What was it like for you?
So it was for free, but the liability, we couldn't put you in a police car. We couldn't give you a gun. We couldn't give you the state of Georgia required you to have powers of arrest. In order to check that box, you had to be certified. So we had to go to the academy. During my career back in '94, you could work up to a year as a police officer without going to the police academy. That all changed. So you had to go to the police academy to be a law enforcement officer. The peace officer standards and training in Georgia didn't even require you to qualify with your weapon. That came about during my career.
Right.
But they said, listen, if you don't go qualify to your training point, if you don't go shoot your gun at least once a year, we're going to take your powers of arrest away. So we saw the transition.
And a lot of that comes from bad situations that occur. And I'm not defending, I'm not attacking Georgia, but people did. Here's the thing. In certain parts of the United States, you can still be a police officer at 18. You can't even buy beer, but you can be a police officer and carry a gun and do all those other things. But everybody is so worried about civil liability, rightfully so, that they require minimum standards.
Correct. And we got into a pinch. We had a police officer who had not been in the police academy, was killed in the line of duty, and it came out, well, gee, he wasn't a certified police officer. How could you charge this gentleman with killing a cop when he hasn't even been to the police academy? And that's what changed it.
Right.
Meg's, Georgia.
So you've seen a lot of changes. And here's something else that, and we'll get into your story more, because there's so much about policing that people just don't get. And it's not their fault. People don't tell them. And that's the main reason why we do the show. But we were in Baltimore held accountable for what happened in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm not picking on your state, Georgia, in the 1960s. And it was 1990s. It was not even close. We're not the same people. But if somebody did something crazy in Los Angeles, we caught the brunt of it in Baltimore.
Yep. And I feel your pain. I graduated high school in '96, pulled over my first car in Quitman, Georgia, and got accused of being one of the officers in the Rodney King beatings.
Isn't that something?
Yep.
And you can't defend yourself from it. It's like, look, all I say was, what part of the United States was that in? Because we're not the same people. We don't do the same thing. And you don't know me, by the way. Do you know me?
Yeah. I was in high school. I was in Miss Cher's, sophomore year. What was I doing? How was I in Los Angeles, California, chasing down Rodney King?
I know. It's crazy. Yeah. One of the misconceptions, and we're going to take a short break in just a moment, and we hear all the time, and it's not just with the homicides. One of the things that people love to say, at least in Baltimore, it wasn't true. We didn't care your walk of life. We didn't care if you lived a lifestyle that put you in danger. The other, we would still investigate it wholeheartedly. The other one was sex assaults. Whether they be sex workers or children, we investigated them all the same, but no one ever heard what it took.
Correct.
And we're going to hear from Bryan, straight from him, what it did take and how we got into that field. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Here's another location where you can find all kinds of news for free. That's medium.com, spelled medium.com. Look for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast profile on the Medium app and follow it.
Got questions about your Medicare coverage? Who doesn't? Take a few moments to get real answers and options, all for free. Call 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. 866-427-1225. Or visit lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com to learn more.
Return our conversation on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show with Bryan McCree. Bryan is a retired law enforcement sheriff's detective in the state of Georgia. His website, his company now is lems.online, lems.online. We'll talk more about what he does today. One of the things I know about your career, Bryan, is that you became a specialist in investigating serious sex assaults against children. That's not the line of work that most people strive for, is it?
No, it's not. And I fell into it. I didn't seek it out. It kind of just landed at my feet.
And that's usually what happens. It's like, oh, by the way, this is your post. This happened on your post. You got this job. Or you're a detective, and I need someone to pull. We got an opening. We need you to handle this and handle it. And they walk away quickly.
Yeah, I was kind of recruited. You know, my career started as a school resource officer. There was no other post available for me. So I landed as an SRO in an elementary school. So they saw my interaction with the kids. You know, I was a young single guy. I had no connections with a wife or children. And I created a relationship early on. And when I moved into the detective bureau, the other officers were like, we don't want to work these cases. And they would come into my office and they would swap them out like cards.
Right.
You know, hey, you know.
Like old baseball playing cards. I got so-and-so. You want this one?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I don't, you know. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I'd rather work a child molestation over a stolen lawnmower or a burglary or a credit card fraud any day of the week. And
the worst cases for me, Bryan, were the property crimes, and because they're so tedious. And I'm not saying that they're not dangerous. They are dangerous. What I'm saying is it takes a certain skill set. I didn't have that skill set. I wanted the excitement.
I wanted to make a difference.
Yeah.
And, you know, you work a stolen lawnmower, you wait 6 months for the lawnmower to pop on a search warrant for narcotics or show up on a pawn list, and then you get an arrest. And then it was the same guy before. He's out before the ink dries. You work a child sexual assault and the guy's going away. And
that's right away. It's serious business from Jump Street. And I got to say this. Someone asked me the other day, have you ever been in a pawn shop? And I'm like, other than policing, no, never in my life. Why would I go there? And I'm not saying one day I'm going to go make a magical excursion and see what's going on in those places because they're always so popular.
It's interesting. It's really interesting to see the history and what people, you know, one man's junk and another man's treasure, and that's what it boils down to, and they make money at it.
So you got this investigating sex assault on children quite by accident. It wasn't something you gravitated towards. It was given to you.
It was, but then I realized that I had a knack. And not only did I realize it, but my supervisors did, my sheriffs did, and they nurtured it. I owe a lot about my career to the people who saw something in a young college kid that had no experience. But when I picked up on something, they said, he's really good at this. Let's feed him more. And I ran with it.
And one of the things that, and I'm just guessing from someone who's done the job too, is the human connection is a big. Someone asked me today in his Clubhouse social audio app, what's going above and beyond as a police officer? I said, number one, it all starts with having a real conversation, listening to what people say, of developing that human connection. And with children, it's hard not to get emotionally involved, but you really want to find out what happened, and you want to find the person that did this.
Correct. We went through a thing called forensic interviewing, and it was called finding words. And that's what we worked on, was trying to help the children in a non-leading way to find their words. Explain to me what happened. Help me understand what you went through. And that's what it was, getting on their level, sitting down with them, playing with them, building with some rapport, connecting with them, and then getting down to the brass tacks. Because ultimately, we want what's best for this kid. We don't care about the evidentiary value. I just want this child to grow up and be a productive member of society.
Right.
If I can lock his offender up and put them away so nobody else can get victimized by them, bravo. But I'm not going to risk the future of a child to give an interview.
Look, I hear you. And I'm never to my dying day will understand this. Number one, we were taught early on in the academy, when you were taking a sex assault case report from, let's just say, a 5-year-old, remember this, their mind doesn't think like an adult. There's a reason why they're talking about certain things, and it's not something they generated on their own. It's from experience, so believe them. Then you got to find the evidence to support the claims, which is not always cut and dry.
Easy.
But here's the thing that I want to say, that as a police officer, before I had children, even after I had children, I never understood one of two things: how so-called loved ones could physically assault children or sexually assault them, because that was usually who did it.
Yeah, we found that in more than 80% of the cases. It was a close neighbor, friend of the family, or people in their own home. And I've seen it ruin neighborhoods. You have in Georgia, you have a road named after you, and you've got that whole family living on that road, 3 or 4 generations, and all of a sudden you get an accusation and somebody goes to jail for molesting one of the grandbabies, and it divides the entire zip code. It's horrible.
And who's the bad guy?
Exactly.
Usually, who gets the brunt of the blame for that?
In the beginning, it was me. It was like, why are you doing this to our family? Why is this coming up? And I'm sitting there and I try to articulate going, I have a responsibility to you, but I also have a responsibility to your grandbaby or your nephew. Well, and it was just always, in the beginning, it was me. I was the reason they were going through this. Even the victims, I've had victims would go wash their hands until their fingers bled because of what happened to them as they try to disclose and find the words to explain to me why granddaddy ran his hand up my shirt.
Right.
And anybody who would rub their hands raw in a sink is telling the truth. To get off of a golf cart and come inside, wash their hands to the point that they bleed, and sit in the living room with me and tell me how granddaddy assaulted her on the golf cart.
I've never heard a story like that on the news any time in my life.
Yeah, I lived it. And the happy ending was 10 years later, I ran into her in a grocery store, and she recognized me and told me she was okay.
Yeah. And by the way, this is going to sound sappy, but we had people that would approach us 10, 5, sometimes 5 years after and say, thank you for arresting me because I got sober because of you. You saved my life from a drug overdose. I've turned my life around. I went to prison, and I've led an exemplary life since then. I paid my debt to society. I'm a stand-up guy. Those moments were phenomenal.
Yep, the small victories, very few and far between, but treasured nonetheless.
Yeah, and they made my day, and here, the negative part is, and we'll get back to your story. We got a short break coming up in a second. When we had really slow times, and usually it was day work, it was usually Saturday or Sunday, I would meet kids 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age, talk to them. It'd be great. And then I'd be the last face they see when they were shot to death because they shorted their drug dealer. And it was acting like it was free entertainment on Saturday night. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're talking about Bryan McCree, retired sheriff's detective, a specialist investigating sex assaults on children. We'll talk more about a couple specific cases and what the media often gets wrong. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
From loneliness to a fulfilling, intimate relationship. Shot at Love, the book, offers insights, life lessons, and a lot of comedy. Get a copy of Shot at Love for all those looking for love and striking out. Written by Carrie Brett, a celebrity photographer and podcaster in Boston. This book will have readers crying, laughing, and learning what to do. Get it at shotatlovebook.com. It's shotatlovebook.com. That's shotatlovebook.com.
If you do any business on social media, creating content is one thing. The trick is, how do you turn those people that comment on your social media into consumers? There's a great tool, and you can get more information at letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Best of all, you can start it for free. letpops.com. Check it out today. Return our conversation with Bryan McCree on a Law Enforcement Talk Radio show. Bryan is a retired sheriff's detective from Georgia. He is also one of the movers and shakers. His company called LEMS. Their website's lems.online. It's lems.online, and we will talk more about what they do a little bit later on. We're having a conversation, Bryan, about investigating child sex assaults. Can you tell us about a case that comes to mind? I'm sure there's plenty of them.
Sure. The biggest one, of course, without getting into the names, was we got a referral. In Georgia, we have what they call mandated reporters. So if a child discloses to a guidance counselor that they've been sexually assaulted, they're required by law to report.
Right.
So I was actually called to my old school, an elementary school there in Quitman, Georgia, where a young girl had reported to her best friend, who later then disclosed to a guidance counselor that her father had raped her. Beautiful 14-year-old female, sat her down. Fortunately, in this situation, she was extremely articulate. She was extremely nervous. I'm a big dude, so we would sit there and talk, and we built some rapport. And she told me stories about how the father would watch her bathe, would touch her and hold her, and she would, shrug it off and roll over and go to bed. But the one instance was where he actually had full intercourse with her, and she was very descriptive about every aspect of it. And it was kind of rough for me, because when I was dealing with 5-year-olds, it was kind of, you had to be careful. Right. You couldn't lead them. You had to make sure that they could, get to where you wanted them to go in their own way, in their own words. But she had intimate details, where they were in the house, how she could articulate how it made her feel and how she was scared, and all at the same time how she loved her daddy. And it was wrenching. That's
the conundrum. That's the thing that is so emotionally disturbing. It's like they have this love, this attachment for this person, and then they're doing things that, and so many of the kids that I experienced, and not just the kids but adults too, what did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this?
Yep. What did I do to make him mad at me? Why did he do this to me and not my sister or not my brother? But yeah, this was for me. This was a pinnacle case in my career, because it was the first time we started using alternate light sources. It was the first time where I wrote multiple search warrants. First time that I did DNA on a suspect. First time I did a search warrant for a computer, for digital media devices, which in this case, I'm about to date myself, were VHS tapes.
Uh-huh. You are a geezer. You're old.
Yeah, I am old. I have gray hair, and every one of them has a name. So it was, and I even teach my students now. I said, being a detective is unraveling a sweater, finding a thread, pulling on it, and seeing what comes down. And that's what it was. We started with a search warrant on a house. We're always looking for the corroboration.
Right.
We're always looking for, hey, he did this. I saw the picture of the fish on the mantle. He used a maroon washcloth to clean himself up with. Find these little pieces of the sweater to pull on. So when we got a warrant, we were looking for those things. We found the maroon washcloth. We found where he tried to bleach it and wash it repeatedly. And one thing led to another. He had holes in the walls where he could watch her bathe and shave her legs. And he would stage her, her shampoo and her other products in a method so that she would be driven to one bathroom where he could stand in the closet to looking at a hole at her through the wall.
And here's the thing about this that is really disturbing, and it really is no comfortable way to talk about it. So I'm just going to let it out there. As a police officer, before the detectives got involved, we would handle these calls. And if it was a recent case a recent attack, we'd take them to the hospital and they'd have what's called a rape kit done, a rape kit investigation, where they would gather physical evidence. When it's a case that was reported some time afterwards, you don't have that, obviously.
No physical evidence. We call it it's great to have physical evidence. CSI, the video, the TV shows, all that just destroyed modern law enforcement because they didn't realize, they got a fingerprint off a 9-volt battery. Well, statistically, 2% of the cases we get a fingerprint. Of those 2%, less than 3% of that 2% are APHIS quality prints.
Right.
My entire 30-year career, I got a palm print. That was it that I could match to a suspect, only because I had his butt in jail. That's the only time I've ever done anything like that.
I can tell you my career, Bryan, I agree. One time we got a fingerprint off of a gun, and it was off a piece of ammo in a magazine that they loaded.
An unfired piece of ammo.
And other than that, it's very rare. And things like contact DNA, we didn't have. So I don't know if cases are actually solved by that, but getting fingerprints, readable fingerprints that could be used in court, used as an investigative tool, was very rare. And you had to go by what the victim said and find the corroborating evidence. So getting back to the conversation, one of the hardest things I had to do as a police officer, especially with really young sex assault victims, was have the conversation about taking them to the hospital for the rape kit.
Sure. So in Georgia, we have what we call SANE nurses. And they were medical staff that were certified and specially trained to collect the rape kit. The rape kits usually involve, swabs for various parts of the genitalia, brushes. They collected everything, and they were extremely invasive. So they were so invasive that we would document in our report for the chain of custody as I stood outside the door.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at. I would say I'll be right outside.
Yep.
And here's the thing.
My digital camera, and she would use my camera.
Right.
But I was not in there.
One of the things, Bryan, I went through policing in the 1980s, and there was a big move where sex assault victims, especially adults, they wanted to pair them with female officers. And I never had that problem. I always worked, this is just me, I'm just a cop, and you're safe with me. And that was never an issue for me. Was that an issue for you?
No. I think it was, I was extremely approachable. I was soft-spoken, and I showed true concern, and I think that's what did it. But there were just, to your point, there were just times when it was extremely inappropriate for me to be in the room.
Oh, yeah.
But I've asked them, I said, listen, if you feel more comfortable talking to a female, I will find you one. I will go to a neighboring agency and get you somebody to talk to. And I've always been okay.
Yeah.
And departments would come to me and go, we need a female that works child sexual assaults or rape cases. I said, not really, but I understand why you want one.
No, I get it too. And there's so much about this. Number one, and I'm going to phrase this as a form of question. I always found you said you started this line of work before you had children. It was emotionally taxing and difficult for me before children and especially after children. Did you find it to be the case with you?
I always had the ability to switch it off. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, there were cases where children were killed in fires that I couldn't switch it off. And there were times when I would lose my cool during an interview on a child sexual assault, an offender, and I would have to dial it back. But I learned from my experiences, and I'll never had a GBI agent once tell me, he goes, listen, get a statement, get it reviewed, get it confirmed by the DA, and then call the guy a cuss word.
Yeah.
Then you got your statement. And I can't tell you how many times I have battled other family members, got a confession, the guy's hugging me, thanking me, and then I go, there's one more person you got to talk to. And I bring in his wife, and you get to tell her what you did to that child. Whoa, man. I mean, you want to talk about the victories, because we were pieces of, you're doing this to my husband, and now I got a written confession from this guy. He's going to tell you what he did to your daughter's best friends when they spent the night.
We're talking with Bryan McCree. He is a retired sheriff's detective, specialized in investigating sex assaults on children. And he is one of the movers and shakers for LEMS. Their website is lems.online. When we return, we're going to talk more about investigating child sex assaults and his effect on him. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You can find us on LinkedIn. Yeah, we have a profile for the show, but my personal profile is the one that's chock full of content. Just do a search on LinkedIn for John J. Wiley. That's JOHN JAYWILEY. Or just go to linkedin.com/in/John, the letter J, Wiley. And be sure to connect.
Your golden years are supposed to be easy and worry-free, at least in regards to finances. If you are over 70, you can turn your life insurance policy into cash. Visit LETsavings.com. That's LETSAVINGS.com. LETsavings.com. Or call 866-480-4252. Again, that's 866-480-4252 to see if you qualify.
Return a conversation with Bryan McCree on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Bryan is contacted from the great state of Georgia. He's a retired sheriff's detective for an agency in Georgia. He specialized in investigating sex assaults on children, and he is one of the movers and shakers and founders of LEMS. It's LEMS.online is the website, LEMS.online, and we'll talk about what they do in a moment. Bryan, I found as I look back on my career, especially when it came to sex assaults, investigating sex assaults, there was usually there's two types of offenders. One is the unknown stranger, which is very rare, and the other one is someone that they're familiar with, especially with children. Are there other factors that, in your experience, that are similar?
Not really. To your point, you either got the serial rapists that are preying on the unsuspected victim, but then in 90% of the cases, it's a friend, a relative, somebody very close to you that you know. We saw this with financial crimes. Uh-huh. Somebody used my credit card. Well, come to find out it was your son who needed tires for his car. But with child sexual assaults, it was always somebody that had kind of a relationship. I could probably count on one hand how many cases I had that were totally random.
That's what I was getting at. One case of mine, and actually two cases. One was a real estate agent, and she was showing an apartment to a stranger. And the other one was a serial rapist. We called him the kissing rapist, and I caught him on my off time. But the vast majority of them were family members or someone that family trusted.
Mm-hmm. We were building a new jail at my facility, and I was a detective on call, and the dispatch called me during the middle of the day at lunchtime. I was on my way back from lunch, and says, "Hey, listen, we got a rape at the construction site." I was like, "All right, back up. It's been a long day. What did you just say to me?" And come to find out, we had 70 employees out on this construction site. And one temporary female worker said the guy dragged her into a dark room, tried to stick his hands down her pants and sexually assault her. And we had inmates working on. We had nonviolent inmates that were also helping with the labor, almost 70 people. And of all the people that she accused, even with the inmates, he was the only one that did 7 years in Florida for rape.
Go figure.
And we lost the case. There was no physical evidence. We took it all the way to trial, tried to find other victims in other states wherever this guy landed, and we got a not guilty verdict. It was hard.
And by the way, there's a lot of similarity investigating. I'm not a homicide detective, but there's a lot of similarities in investigating homicides and sexual assaults. When the sexual assault, the victim's still alive, you at least have that information they give you. Sure. You want to successfully prosecute them, but you don't always get to. With homicides, and here's where the similarity is. Most of the time, it's someone they know.
Correct. And fortunately so, as horrible as that sounds, because if it was just a total random crime with little or no physical evidence, we wouldn't catch them.
Right. And the other thing is people wouldn't leave their house. It's bad enough.
That's right. Yeah, they'd be scared to death. We talk about the snipers, that were plaguing, was it Seattle, where people were scared to pump gas. They just didn't know when somebody was going to get shot.
And by the way, I think it was not too far from you, Fulton County, Georgia. We had a police officer shot in Atlanta. We've had two other ones. One was killed in a car accident, I believe. Another one was shot and killed, and it never ends. And you look at the areas and go, oh, that's like Mayberry, RFD. What a great place. I'm going to move there. Nothing bad ever happens there. they got criminals too.
That's right. And just the same way, they're either raising them and they're career criminals that just got lucky that day, or there's people that migrate in there just like you migrated in there, and they're just horrible people.
The one thing we used to tell people all the time, Bryan, and I'm sure you can agree, and I'd say, by the way, criminals travel, and they travel to areas where they think people have money. That's where they steal cars from. That's where they do robberies from. They take public transportation. They steal cars. So you're right. You live in a great neighborhood, but that doesn't mean you're immune, and you can take your head off the swivel.
You better believe it. You get complacent. And we're seeing that in modern law enforcement where, officers have been on it for 20, 30 years. They're overweight, they're untrained, they're unfit, and they're like nothing ever happens in Mayberry. Next thing you know, they're in a fight for their life, and they're losing. Right.
And look, I've been there, all about the fat and out of shape part. That came later in life. But I remember the last shooting I was in that I thought that this is one that ended my career. And the guy tried to shoot me with my service weapon, which was a revolver. That's how long ago it was, while still in my hand. And shots were fired towards my face, his face, and we both survived. But the thought that came through my mind was, this guy's trying to kill me. And he doesn't know me. B, I'm going to die, but it's not going to be tonight, and won't be because of what he does. I'll do whatever it takes to survive.
Yep.
And that's kind of the mindset you got to have.
Yeah, we call it combat mindset, and officers, they don't get it in the academy, and it's a mindset that, like Lieutenant Dave Grossman said in his books On Killing and On Combat, we're all dead. None of us are getting out of this alive, and you will decide if you rule the day. That's
exactly. I posted something really quickly on Facebook the other day. Said, if you're going through a hard time, repeat this as often as you need to. I'm not the one, and I won't quit.
That's right.
From day one in the academy, we're taught you never quit the fight. You never quit the fight. And I'm not preaching to the choir here, but so many people quit the fight 2-3 years after retiring. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm talking about. You never quit.
I'm almost 50 years old. I never leave the gun would never leave the house without a gun. I qualify repeatedly every quarter. I shoot all the time, and I teach that tactics to new cops. They've got to understand, if you leave your gun at home, you become a victim.
Right. Oh, man, we could talk about this heavy-duty stuff all day long.
There's no doubt.
And I'm so bad, I walk the dog and I'm armed with a gun. And I have a Rottweiler. So, because bad stuff happens. And people think, oh, you're nuts. Oh, I hope I never need it. And in 30 years, I haven't needed it. So you retired from police work, and now you go into LEMS. What is that, and what do you do?
So Law Enforcement Management Systems is a law enforcement service provider, and I joke about it. We do everything from technology, IT needs for small departments, all the way to NFA items like machine guns and suppressors for TAC teams, officers, or departments that need, new rifles. Kind of the cornerstone we have in that market is we provide a duty-ready rifle. You could buy a gun off state contract, and it comes in a box with a lock and a magazine.
Right.
And then agencies have to buy optics, suppressors, flashlights, and everything and outfit it. Ours come completely outfitted. Suppressors, optics, flashlights, magazines, slings, flip-up sights, cases, everything, and it's ready to go out of the packaging.
And wouldn't it be nice if we didn't need that anymore, but we do? North Hollywood bank robbery shootout proved that.
Right.
Austin, Texas, the shooting of Bell Cop proved that. It goes on and on and on. You got to have AR-15 rifles in your patrol car.
No, if you're not, your officers are losing a battle. They cannot engage targets down the halls of schools. They cannot shoot through body armor. They cannot, anybody with a rifle could pin your officers down because they're not effective with their pistol at more than 25 yards.
No.
So, yes. Yeah. We're seeing a huge paradigm shift. Even in the police academy, this is the first year in Georgia that police academy students are getting rifle training, like as of January of this year, for the first time ever. It's needed. It's we tell it now. Listen, your pistol is to get you to your rifle. Your rifle is to get you home.
We used to say this, and granted, I'm an old school guy. When we had really bad situations, you had the option where you'd call SWAT or QRT is what we called our department, and they would form up and take them 2-3 hours sometimes to get there. Or as a patrol officer, as a patrol sergeant, you had to handle it. And we would do whatever it took with guns, whatever it took to neutralize the situation.
Yep. You use whatever tools you had at your situation. And, the days of waiting for SWAT ended on Columbine.
Exactly.
They don't wait anymore.
Exactly. Well, they had this idea that let's be safe. Let's up an outer perimeter. We don't go indoors, and we have the experts handle it. Guess what?
Yep.
Meantime, our children are getting slaughtered, and that's not
you can hear
not
the
effective.
gunshots. Yeah, you can stand outside and hear the gunshots. Every time that gun goes off, a kid dies.
Then,
You're going to sit there and wait for that? Negative.
Parkland really affected me. Sandy Hook in Connecticut really affected me. Columbine really affected me. All that stuff has a profound effect. We could talk about that all day long. I want to go in lems.online. That is your website. Can people get all the info, what you offer there?
Absolutely. You can go to the website, hit the contact form. You're going to get me. You're going to get my director of operations, Lexi. You're going to get one of us, and we're going to get you squared away. If you've got a need, if you need to be advised, the biggest thing we're doing now is new chiefs are coming in. They're my generation chiefs coming in, and they're like, Bryan, we don't know where to start. Where do we buy cars? Where do we buy? And we advise you on all that stuff. We'll give you all the tools and resources that we have at our disposal. And if we don't know where to get it or what to do or how to handle it, we're going to put you in the room with the people who do.
And by the way, that's great that you do that, because a lot of the big agencies, they have people to do that. They pass that information down. The smaller ones don't. LEMS.online. It's LEMS.online. Bryan, thanks for your service, and thanks for being a guest on the show. Both very much appreciated.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.
If your brain is at full capacity with to-dos, birthdays, and dinner plans, meet Skylight Calendar. It syncs your entire family's schedule onto a sleek digital display, so you focus on important things like where you left your coffee. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/talk. Go to skylightcal.com/talk for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/talk.